You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Well, folks, we know one thing for sure. Ryan Day may stink against top 5 teams, but he does own James Franklin still, to this day. Tremendous job by the Ohio State Buckeyes. They get the win on the road at number 3 Penn State. A season saver, a job saver for Ryan Day. We talked so much this week about the fact that he realistically was kind of coaching for his job in this one, and that a loss in this game, maybe makes things more complicated in terms of his the Ohio State status as a playoff team. If they have 2 losses to ranked teams, and their only ranked win they only have 1 ranked win if they were to beat Indiana. So that's a pretty big one. That's a pretty big deal to get that one on the road, even though we know Ohio State's kind of been James Franklin's bugaboo and been Penn State's bugaboo these last few years. I'm not selling this one short. And I was one of the people who picked Penn State late this week. And I'm going to be honest, guys. If you know me by now, if you listen to this podcast enough, you understand that I've admitted on numerous occasions that I'm the type of fan sometimes who likes to set myself up to be disappointed, so that if my teams win, I can be happy about it. And so that's a lot of what that was, if I'm being 100% honest. I was protecting myself, and I'm glad that I get to sit here before you happy about the idea that Ohio State gets a win. They get a win against the top 3 team. I do want to talk about whether or not how we sort of grade this win against the top 3 team for Ryan Day, because on some level, it counts, and we can't take that away from him, and I'm going to give him credit for that. But on the other hand, when it's against Penn State, who this Ohio State team has owned over the years, does it feel like it's as big as some of the other games that he's botched against top 5 teams throughout his time at Ohio State? So we'll get into that, but I don't want to necessarily start there. There are a number of different points to sort of hit on here, including the fact that, Ohio State played really well. And they tend to, they obviously own this matchup. 8 straight wins now against Penn State for the Buckeyes. But it's crazy. For as much as we criticize Ryan Day, and rightfully so, I've been just as critical as anybody over the last couple of weeks of Ryan Day. But for as much as we criticize him, it just feels like we can always hang our head on the fact that we're not Penn State, right? And we're not James Franklin and their situation, because James Franklin is what Ryan Day is for us. James Franklin is for Penn State, but the difference is he can't get past the guy that we constantly say isn't good enough. So there's some sort of irony there, that the way Penn State feels about their head coach, the same way we feel about our head coach at Ohio State. But the difference is our head coach has continually beaten the guy that can't seem to get past him and James Franklin. But the decision-making in key moments. And I kind of said during the week, this was going to be a game of, all right, who clenches first? Who makes the first big mistake? And the first big mistake really came from Will Howard in this game, but he was able to respond. We'll get into his play today because he was not very good overall, but he sort of showed this grittiness to him that is enough for Ohio State to get the win. So we'll talk about that. But I actually felt from a composure standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint, I felt like Ryan Day today was pretty good. And I understand, not pretty good. I thought Ryan Day was great today. I did. I thought he went for it on the right 4th downs. I thought he kept the pressure on. He trusted his defense, which was playing phenomenal today. That's a big point we got to get into in this conversation. Just all around, really good performance by this Ohio State team today. And I walk away very pleased with the effort that they gave. And there were some statements made in this game. And I don't know that I can absolve Ryan Day entirely for, his part in what this team's shortcomings over the years, and including this year in the Oregon game and otherwise. And some of the the fact that there's still some questions that he has to answer as a head coach of this program moving forward. So I can't just absolve him from all those things because he gets another win over Penn State, a team that he's owned over the years. But I do think like a game like this was a statement for him. I mean, I talked about it. Others talked about it. There was a lot of things said about the idea that he was coaching for his job today, because if you lose that game to Penn State and you have 2 losses, you get a chance to beat maybe one ranked team on your schedule in Indiana. I think Ohio State probably ends up making the playoff as a 2-loss team because they're Ohio State, even if they don't win the Big Ten. But in the same breath, like, there's no guarantee. And the thing I said this week is that, like, you leave that in the hands of the committee to decide, and you want to make sure there's no doubt about your status as a playoff team when you get past, to the Big Ten championship game and beyond. You want to cement yourself as the team that deserves a spot in the playoffs. So I think like this was a big one in terms of getting back on track and proving that you still are in that national championship conversation, I would say, because there were some doubts about that the last couple of weeks. You lose to Oregon and you wanted a better response against Nebraska, and you just straight up didn't get it. Like that Nebraska game was pretty embarrassing overall. And so to see the response today, I think it was a statement for Day's job. I don't know that it doesn't absolve him completely, like I said, but it does cool that conversation off until at least the Indiana game, if not the Michigan game. I think I'm at a place now where I feel comfortable saying they are going to be a playoff team because they'll have a loss to Oregon as long as they win the next 2 and don't stumble here. Even if they lose to Indiana, you can go back and say, well, we lost to the team that's number 1 in the country for an extended period of time, maybe till the end of the regular season. We beat the number 3 team in the country at the time on the road at their place, and we did have a tougher schedule. We were going on the road to most of these ranked opponents we were playing. So this definitely puts Ohio State in a good spot, and it puts Ryan Day in a better spot in terms of his job security. That doesn't mean, again, that he's just off the hook for everything. I think he still has a lot to prove. He has to beat Michigan still, final week of the regular season. That is always going to be the biggest litmus test for any coach at Ohio State, and he's lost to him the last 3 years, so it has to happen. But yeah, like it can't be stated enough that this was a statement win for Ryan Day. Although I wonder how Ohio State fans are going to feel about it on some level when it's a team that he always tends to beat. I'm not looking at it that way because I'm not that. I can be cynical. I'm not that cynical. As much as I'm on board with a lot of the Ryan Day criticisms of late and especially this year. I'm not going to sit here and like sell this one short and say he doesn't deserve credit for it or anything. Listen, they put up a dud of a game last week and still eked out the win. And then in a close road matchup with a conference rival of yours, they had a hard fought win. Like he talks so much about toughness with his team, and sometimes it feels like he's just like faking his way through it and trying to like tell himself enough that his team is tough until he believes it and he can convince everybody else to believe it. But today, like, it felt like a tough win. The defense played phenomenal. Offensive line, which we'll get to, had some moments where they struggled, but I thought overall played a pretty solid game. And especially that last drive, which we have to talk about as well. There were so many moments in this one where it felt like that toughness Ryan Day tries to sort of speak into existence, but it feels like it's not really there, came out and showed itself. And maybe we finally have an Ohio State team that we can believe is tougher than the previous years. And so maybe that bodes well for them the rest of the season. But I'm not gonna sell this one short for Ryan Day. It's a big win. He improves to 3-6 against top 3 team, top 5 teams in on his record. And that does mean something. Now it's about finishing out the regular season strong. And if you get that rematch with I almost said Georgia, if you get that rematch with Oregon in a Big Ten championship game, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to come out on top in that one? And I think that's the Michigan game is the next test. I shouldn't say that. Indiana is the next test. The next major test in terms of his job status and all these things is going to be Michigan. And then assuming, again, I feel pretty comfortable saying it, that they're going to be in the playoff, what you're able to do against Oregon in a potential Big Ten title game, what you're able to do in the playoff, those things all come next in terms of this Ohio State team, cementing themselves as a true national title contender that we thought they could be. So he still has a lot to prove, but today was a step in the right direction for him, and certainly staves off some of the heat that he was under in recent weeks for the time being, with the caveat that all those floodgates open back up again in a couple weeks. If they drop one to Indiana, even though Indiana's a good team, you're going to be expected to win that game, I would imagine, because you're the more talented team. We'll leave the Ryan Day part of the conversation there. I'll wrap it with this on the opposite side of things. I clarified why I picked Penn State. I was trying to protect myself and be able to feel happy if they win. Is just expecting in my head it was going to be a loss, and I guess I should just never do that again when they're playing Penn State, because you can always count on James Franklin to botch something. I thought his clock management at the end of the half was bad, and then it still almost worked out because they almost had the touchdown. And then Davidson Igbinosun made one of the most incredible interceptions you will ever see in your life. Basically, like, the receiver bobbled the ball, and he was able to just kind of steal it, get his foot in as he was falling out of bounds. I mean, that was a game-changing play, because the other end of the field, you had the Will Howard fumble out of the end zone, which I do need to talk about. And so you lose points, or you don't get points on the board there. And on the flip side, like, that opened up to an opportunity for Penn State to go down the field, and they were going to take that turnover and turn it into points for themselves, and then take a lead into the half, and you stifle that out because you make such an amazing play. This secondary's had a couple bad weeks in a row where they didn't play their best. And last week the defense played better. But I still think, like, going back to the Oregon game, there were some questions about this secondary. I think that's very fair to say. But today, man, like, that group played great. And I understand, like, Penn State doesn't have this world-beating wide receiver like Ohio State does. But to slam the door the way that they did, I mean, here's what I can say wholeheartedly. I don't know if Ohio State is going to win a national title, if they have the entire makeup to win a national title as a team. I like to think they do, but I still have some questions about the offensive line. The injuries are a problem there. And I do think, like, there's some moments where you see some lapses and you're like, okay, a team like Georgia is going to take advantage of that. You know what I mean? Or Oregon, if you meet them again. So I see those things. But in that same vein, I do feel comfortable saying this defense, if they play like they did today, is national championship level good. Like, the goal line stand at the end of the fourth quarter to keep Penn State out of the end zone with a chance to tie, and then that sets up a drive where you just pound the ball down their throats to seal the deal and get out of there with a win. I mean, that was one of the most just that defensive stand in general was incredible. It was they didn't give up an offensive touchdown all day. The only touchdown they scored was the pick six on Will Howard's first pass of the game. And like, this defense essentially stood on its head. That group was great. I will say this, like, there still are some concerns that the front four don't get a lot of pressure. They had back-to-back sacks, Cody Simon and then JT Tuimoloau, I know, got in on one, and that was massive for them, kind of back-to-back the drive prior to the drive that got all the way down to the goal line, and then they stoned them there. So there was a few moments like that, and the pressure is still a problem. Jim Knowles maybe a better job today at sort of mixing in some blitzes at key moments. But were they perfect? No, but are there still maybe some questions in terms of how they would fare against some of the other great defenses and teams, or great offenses rather, and teams in college football? Of course. But I thought in the grand scheme of things, this was a superb performance in a matchup where you needed it on the road to play as well as they did and shut down the number 3 team in the country and that offense. They were phenomenal today. And so I do feel comfortable saying, like, that group is national championship good if they play like they did today. It's just about getting that consistently. And we've now seen that 2 weeks in a row. You can tell they took some pride in, we struggled in that Oregon game, we got to bounce back. And then back-to-back weeks now, I think you've seen that defense bounce back in a big way and make some massive, massive plays for this team, including the goal line stand, including the interception. I mean, just a phenomenal job all around. And I want to say this, because Caleb Downs had maybe the toughest assignment of the day for a large chunks of this game. in having to guard against, having to defend Tyler Warren, who was, he's basically Penn State's like best offensive player. I know I actually stupidly sort of glossed over the fact that he's such an impact player in the preview show. That was somebody I didn't talk about as much as I should have, and I apologize for that. I talked a lot about Nick Singleton, who only had 6 carries for 15 yards today, and he caught 6 passes for 54 yards. He was the team's leading wide receiver, and Warren was second with 4 catches for 47 yards. And Warren, as you guys know, does a little bit of everything. But Caleb Downs, man, like, he was great, I thought, about sort of tracking and following and limiting the damage of Warren, and took him away in a number of spots that allowed that made Drew Aller have to kind of rethink where he was going with the football. And when you get him in those positions, he makes bad throws. He throws interceptions. He throws errant passes, and you give yourself an opportunity to stop them. And I thought that was great today. He wasn't on the coverage in the end zone on that 4th down play where they stopped him at the end of the 4th quarter. I think Igbinosun was, and Ransom were in on that play. But like, again, another chance where like he looked there first. He looked right at Warren, gets taken away by the defense, and then he sort of panicked, didn't know where to go with it, looked back over the middle, ball goes out of bounds, and you hold them and stop them short of a chance to score, and you get the ball back to ice it there. It was a tough assignment, and Caleb Downs was phenomenal. I thought there were some other guys that stood out as well, but he definitely did with this secondary that finally I think is living up to the hype of being what they sort of dubbed themselves as the best in America. That was a phenomenal thing to see from this defense today. And I thought they kind of ruled the day, if you will. Now, what's interesting, as good as the defense was, I actually thought like all around, Ohio State from start to finish in this game, aside from the pick 6 on the first drive, or the first possession of the game for Ohio State, they looked like the better team. From that moment on, after Penn State scores on the pick 6 and they're up 10-0, it was like, all right, it was like there was a little bit of like a shell-shocked moment for Ohio State. And then they came out immediately, and Will Howard, like, there's criticisms to be made, and I will get to the criticisms of Will Howard. I think it's very fair to criticize him today for some of his errors and some of the things that went wrong for Ohio State. But that second drive of the game, where, again, after the pick 6, you get it, you go 7 plays, 74 yards, and you eat up 332 in that span, and basically like kill the rest of the first quarter. And it was like, my goodness, like they moved so quickly. They moved past the idea or the thought of the interception, the pick 6. They had a short attention. They had, short-term memory loss and just kind of forgot about it, moved on, and they marched right down the field. And then they followed it up after a stop, after Penn State goes 3 and out, with another touchdown. And so it was like, man, oh man, like they took this game over real quick. Like they took it back real quick. And then you get into the controversial part of this game, which is where they had a chance to go up and to go down the field and score a 3rd straight touchdown, 21 unanswered points. And you get down near the goal line, and Will Howard has the fumble out of bounds that goes out of the side of the end zone. Now, there is a debate to be had, and maybe this is the platform to have it with many of you. I think the fumble out of the end zone rule is the dumbest rule in football. And I will stand by this till the day I die. And I understand that the easy, and until they change it, I understand that the easy response to that is just, well, don't fumble the ball and you don't have to worry about it. I get that. But in no other instance, when a team fumbles the ball, does the ball go out of bounds or whatever without the team gaining possession of the football, and like it kills momentum in that way. I mean, Ohio State had all the momentum. They were rolling. They were poised to score another touchdown. There has to be a better solution to that rule than just being like, well, if you fumble out of the side of the end zone, the ball goes to the other team and it's a touchback. Like, come on, man. Like, let that be for kicks. I get it. But for a fumble, there needs to be some sort of way. And I like this comment here from Richard Hacker. He says, should go out to the 20. I like that. Like, it's kind of like a reverse touchback. Like, you get the ball, you get to keep the ball, but you go back to the 20 and you have to sort of start the drive over from there. Like, I just think I get that it's the rule and it's the way that it's written right now, and it's always been that way. But I year after year, NFL, college, wherever, whatever level of football, I think it's the dumbest thing that you fumble the ball and it kills your momentum just because of an innocuous fumble that goes out of the side that wasn't actually possessed by the other team. To me, if it doesn't get possessed by the other team, it shouldn't just end in a touchback. I like the go back out to the 20 rule. And so I wonder, though, if you guys agree with me that this is the dumbest rule in football, or if you actually think targeting is the dumbest rule in football, which is funny because in back-to-back weeks now, we've seen targeting for go against Ohio State in one of the most, it was by the letter of the law, it was targeting, but man, does it feel like that rule just gets enforced so like disingenuously, and guys are getting thrown out for making just regular football plays. I hate that about that rule, and that rule sucks too. I still lean that the fumble out of the side of the end zone is the dumbest rule or the worst rule, but targeting is a close second. So I'm putting it out to you guys. Let's have a little poll here. I'll put it on Twitter maybe after we get done here. Is targeting or the fumble out of the side of the end zone is a touchback for the other team rule the worst in college sports? Or not even in college sports, in football? I want to know deeply. I'm very, very interested in this. But yeah, like that fumble basically kills that entire drive, kills your momentum, and it almost leads to Penn State then going down the field and scoring a touchdown to take a 17-14 lead into the half, if not for the incredible Igbinosun pick in the end zone, which maybe is the play of the season to this point. I mean, that was just, I guess it's not the play of the season when you got Jeremiah Smith making ridiculous one-handed catches, in back-to-back games earlier this year. But it has to be up there as one of the biggest plays for this season, and certainly momentum swinger for Ohio State to sort of save yourself here in a big game and a big spot on the road that could have changed things for Penn State going into the half. You then enter the break with a lead and knowing you're going to get the ball, and I thought that was huge. So yeah, but along the lines of the fumble, I saw there was a funny tweet. I think it said something along the lines of like, Will Howard is a bona fide goofer or something like that. Like he just goofs up in the key moments. And I do think there's something to be said for that's maybe the biggest criticism of Will Howard to this point is the fact that, and this is what I was saying early in the season, man, like people were getting on me. Corey with a K on Twitter, a guy who follows me, we interact every now and then. He said to me, back when I was being hypercritical of Will Howard as he was throwing for like 300 yards on like 18 passes against, the Marshalls of the world. And he was like, I don't know what else you want to see. And I was like, I just need to see him in a big game, make those plays and show some poise and all those different things. And what's interesting about this game today is that I thought he showed some of those moments mixed in with some questionable ones that made you feel like you were watching Cobb McCord again. I'm not saying he is Cobb McCord. He threw one pick six. He didn't throw three like Cobb McCord did this past week. But it was just concerning that he made some key mistakes and that his maybe biggest blunders to this point are the sliding down with only 6 seconds left in Oregon and the clock had already expired. So maybe not understand the situation there. Granted, I don't think anybody understood the situation because of the stupid 12-minute on the field rule. And then the pick six now in the Penn State game, and then the fact that he fumbled out of the side of the end zone. Like those types of things will kill you in games against better teams and games against top 5 teams in most instances. They overcame them today, but against the Georgias of the world, against the Bamas of the world, if Bama makes the playoff, against the Oregons of the world, you can't have those blunders. I do think to Brian Cato's point here, as he comments in it, said he's not an upgrade over Cobb McCord. Should have had Cam Ward. Cam Ward was my, bell of the ball. I wanted them to go after Cam Ward and just give, all the money they spent on this roster. I wish they would have set some aside to go just pay Cam Ward whatever he was asking for, because that dude is lighting it up. And think about what this offense would look like with him. But you have Will Howard. He's here. And I think he's done a solid job. I actually left the Oregon game feeling like he proved to me a lot about playing on the biggest stages, other than that blunder at the end where he slides down with time expired. But today I think he kind of took a step back in that regard, where first of all, he drops the quote during the week about how Penn State didn't recruit him And, he took that personal or whatever. And we'll see what it looks like on Saturday if they were right or not. And he throws a pick six in his first pass attempt of the game. And it's like, well, clearly it looks like they were right. And then you don't do yourself any favors when you fumble out of the end zone like that. There were some other moments that there was a throw to Carnell Tate down the sideline that would have been a walk-in touchdown if he puts it out in front of him, but he threw it like back shoulder to the sideline, and Tate has to like spin around and then doesn't get either of his feet down in bounds, and so it's an incomplete pass. He did have the really nice one. I'll give him credit for this. There was a really good throw to Jeremiah Smith in the second half that Jeremiah Smith slowed down, and if he doesn't slow down, he makes that catch easy. And again, walks into the end zone. And it was just that was another moment where it was like, Ohio State is clearly the better team here. They just can't finish on some of these drives, and they can't connect on some of these drives and end with the touchdowns that you're looking for to prove that they are like a runaway team in this game. But this game could have easily been, 27-6. Even if you keep the pick six in there, 27-10, maybe 34-10. Like, there was enough opportunities out there that they could have scored a lot more points, and they just fell short in some regards. Some of that was Kyle McCord. And what's funny about the Jeremiah Smith one, even though he slowed down, that ball was in the air, and I was like, he's still going to have a shot at this because it's Jeremiah Smith, and you knew he put the one hand out there, and I was like, he's going to make another one-handed catch. And then he didn't haul that one in, obviously. But it was just one of those things where, like, that's the type of player he is, that he still makes you feel like he can make that play. And so, yeah, like, there were some good throws. There were some bad throws. I still think he's better than Kyle McCord, but this is a game for me that feels like maybe he could be the problem in a tight playoff game against the top teams in the country. And that's not what you want. You don't want your quarterback to be the thing that you're worried about preventing you from, achieving all the goals that you have this season, whether it's Big Ten championship, whether it's national championship, whether it's a deep playoff run, all those things. Like, you need the quarterback who's going to make those plays in the biggest moments and be composed. And conversely, like, again, not his best game. And I'm admitting that wholeheartedly. And he goes out and throws for just 182 yards. He was 16-24, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So clearly not his best game. He did run a little bit. Obviously, the run at the end of the game to sort of steal it was a big one and a nice moment for him to sort of get that win over the team that he felt like should have recruited him more coming out of high school. And so, like, yeah, there were moments for Will, and you could tell, like, the one thing I'll give him credit for in this game is that even with some of the bad play, he didn't let it get to him. Like, it didn't seem to affect his composure. And that was the thing that Ohio State talked about maybe the most in getting Will Howard, was the idea that, like, they are trusting him in those moments to stand up and deliver and be composed and not get rattled. And so there was some elements of him not getting rattled in when the game got a little bit tighter, or where there was some bad plays on his part. But in the same breath, like, he's got to be better if this team truly has a shot at winning a national championship. And you don't want the quarterback to be the thing that costs you. I mean, think about it. That's why they moved on from Will Howard in the first place, was because when they moved on from Kyle McCord in the first place, was because they felt they needed an upgrade at that position if they were truly going to be a national title contender. So he's got to be better. He'll get his next chance to do that in the Indiana game against, like, a ranked team and maybe a tighter spot. And then obviously Michigan after that. How players play in that game tends to go down in history, and we tend to remember that forever. And then maybe in a Big Ten title game. So he's going to have other opportunities most likely. But yeah, like, today was a performance where you sense the toughness factor for him. You sense the ability to shake things off from him and shake off some mistakes, but you didn't necessarily like the big overall picture of McCord. And along those lines, and it's actually a good point, I think, too, from Richard, Richard has been in his bag today with the comments. Will Howard gets no credit for reads and play calling, and this leads perfectly into what I wanted to talk about next, because I thought that Chip Kelly was in his bag today as well. They found ways to, that they ran some iteration of kind of like that read option or the read option play where Will got the snap, looks at the defensive end, kind of took a step up, and then pitching it out to either Henderson or Judkins. They ran that play a number of times in this game, and it worked like every time. And I thought Chip Kelly had he called all the right shots, all the right plays at the right times, moved this team up and down the field efficiently. And then enough can't be said, guys, about that last drive. And the fact that you had a team in Ohio State that struggled to run the football last week. I mean, it was bad, as you guys know. I went off on the offensive line issues on Justin Fry, on Ryan Day last week after that game against Nebraska, because you got exposed for still having a weak offensive line. I can't wrap my head around why they haven't made this more of a priority. But listen, to go out and end that game with what was an 11-play, 58-yard drive where you were on your 1-yard line and you push that ball downfield, you make Penn State burn its timeouts, and then you get the first down to seal it with the Will Howard run there. That was a statement drive as there's ever been for this Buckeyes team this season, maybe the last 2 seasons. That was impressive. And that was honestly if we're looking for reasons for optimism when it comes to this team's offensive line, when it comes to this team being able to run the football, that could be the building block or the start of getting some momentum for that specific phase of the offense moving forward, because they need to be able to run the football. Chip Kelly likes to run the football. That has always been sort of at the root of his crazy high-paced offenses at Oregon, in the NFL, everywhere he's been. Running the football is at the heart of it. And so if they can't do that, they're not going to beat these top teams in the country. They're just not. And so to see that drive, man, like I said, it felt like Ryan Day always likes to hype up how tough his team is, even though people question it. That felt like a drive that proved that your team was pretty damn tough. I'm not saying I'm 100% sold, and there's still not some issues there. I thought Donovan Jackson at moving out to left tackle did a mostly good job. There was a few plays where he just got flat out beat. That'll happen against Abdul Carter. That dude's a freak. He's going to probably be a top 10 pick in the draft next year. So you tip your cap a little bit there. And listen, Donovan Jackson was making his first start at the college level at that position. Granted, he did play tackle in high school. But I think this iteration of the offensive line proves something specifically on that last drive that you can kind of bank on and lean on going into the weeks ahead. I saw a comment here a couple comments here with people sort of jumping in saying that Carson Hinsman played a really good game. I 100% agree with that. I thought he was really solid at the guard spot, sort of filling in for Jackson, who bumped outside. And I thought when Jackson needed to make some big blocks or make some big plays, he did that. I thought he needed more help at times with Abdul Carter. And when Ohio State tended to get away from giving him sort of a chip from a tight end, and part of that was I know D. Scott got hurt, or G. Scott, got hurt, and they had to sort of supplement there and just kind of figure it out and hope that Jackson could hold his own. I understand what they were trying to do there. But there was a few of those moments, and when you leave him one-on-one, that might happen. But if he can get comfortable in that spot, I hope that it can be the start of something. And I do think Hinsman played well enough that you feel good about leaving him as the left guard in place of Jackson, who's going to play outside, I would assume, the rest of the way. I thought Tegra Shabola at the right guard spot, and I know they talked about this on the broadcast, thought he played maybe his best game on this Ohio State offensive line. And maybe that's part of the story too here, is as this group keeps playing together and they get deeper and deeper into the season, maybe they do start to find some rhythm and they do start to play better just naturally. But we know that's been the biggest question about this Ohio State team all season. Coming into the season, when the season started, still is maybe the biggest question now, I would say, with the number of injuries that they sustained. But it felt like you showed something today. You showed some fight today. You showed some heart today with that group specifically that I think could be a momentum builder for this group moving into sort of the home stretch of the season here and into a potential title game in the Big Ten and beyond. So you just hope that they can finally build something off of this, because that's been the big thing. Is every time it seems like they took 2 steps forward, and I get a lot of that was against inferior opponents, then they would just take 2 steps back in a game like Oregon or last week against Nebraska. So I hope that this is the start of this offensive line at least being solid and proving that they can be more physical and proving that they can they can block in the run game and create those opportunities for Judkins and Henderson, because you have two of the best backs, maybe the two best backs in college football, other than, I guess, Ashton Jeanty. He's been incredible. But like, other than him, like, two of the best backs in college football, man. And if you can't create holes for them and get them going, and they definitely had some rhythm today, like, that changes that changes everything. The outlook that we have on Ohio State, it changes completely if they can take care of business in the run game and the offensive line can play more solid football. So I hope that this was just kind of the initial blueprint. They have Purdue and Northwestern, two teams that they theoretically should be able to beat, to maybe iron out some of those kinks, and maybe that leads nicely into the Indiana game, and that offensive line can really be humming. The run game can really get humming, and that would be huge for this team moving forward into any potential playoff scenarios. But yeah, I did think that group played pretty well today, and it's a big step in the right direction. I can't say enough about that last drive just being a major statement for this team to close the game out that way. I mean, nobody saw that coming. And it's it was a sigh of relief to see them be a more physical team for once and win a game that way. Just incredible. All right, we're going to take a very brief break here. I want to just get some final notes in order. But when we get back, like it, love it, leave it from this game, and the Michigan panic meter. I just saw Richard throw in the chat here that Oregon and Michigan are tied at the end of the first at 7. How do I feel about this Michigan team, especially after a win that Ohio State pulled out today over Penn State? Just taking a quick break here. I'll get some thoughts in order, and I'll be back with Like It, Love It, Leave It. Brainstorm some of yours, and you can leave it in the comments section. Give me a few here, and I'll be right back after a couple words from our sponsors here on Sons of the Shoe. All right, guys, some final thoughts here on this post-game edition of Sons of the Shoe after the Buckeyes 20-13 win over Penn State. They beat the number 3 team in the country. I'm guessing the AP poll shakeup will be Oregon 1, assuming they beat Michigan. They still have to finish that. Then Georgia will be 2, assuming they beat Florida. And then Ohio State will probably jump up to 3. You could maybe see Miami after the win they had today against Duke bump up to 4. Maybe Penn State goes to 5. We'll see how it all shakes out, but a big win for Ohio State, as we know. I want to know what your guys like it, love it, leave it are from this game today. We'll get to mine here in a second, but first, we always like to give you, before we leave any episode of Sons of the Shoe, the Michigan Panic Meter. And you guys know I had moved into the light gray in recent weeks after the Oregon game and then after the Nebraska game and I said it wasn't so much about what Michigan had done as much as it was about what Ohio State hadn't done, and that I needed to see some things before I felt confident that they could actually beat this Michigan team and they weren't just going to pee down their leg in a big moment. But after today, and this is pending a potential upset win for Michigan, who's tied with Oregon apparently right now at the end of the first quarter. But as things stand today, I'm going back to the dark gray. No worry. If for those who are new to the Michigan Panic Meter, the gray is you're not worried. The red is you're full on panic. That's how the meter kind of works back and forth here. I am nowhere near the red. I've backed out of the light gray. I'm in full dark gray. It's almost black. You can see it on the meter there. It's almost black. I'm so confident in this Buckeyes team after today, and I feel good. And that's kind of the beauty of football, right? Week to week, we change our thoughts on how we feel about a team. And certainly today's win for me was a statement that makes me feel good again about their ability to beat Michigan, because I do think they are the more talented team and the better team. Now, there are some different things that come into play in that game. The fact that it's a rivalry, some of the nerves that are involved, just some eeriness about those two teams when they face off against each other. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. After this week, I'm back in the dark gray. Again, pending what happens with Michigan here against Oregon today. All right, let's get to the final portion of the show, which, as I said, I wanted you guys to sort of think about some answers here for your like it, your love it, and your leave it for this matchup and this win over Penn State. We will start with the like it. And for me, I have to go with the thing I waxed poetic about for a good portion of the first section of the show, just the defense. And I'll maybe specifically I'll say the Igbinosun interception was the highlight today. So I'll put that as a like it as well. But the defense as a whole, man, like that group came to play for the second straight week. They're the reason, by and large, that they won this game. They made plays when they needed to. They got a big fourth down stop. Like, they looked like a defense that can compete for a national championship for the second straight week, and they did it on a bigger stage in a tough road environment against the number 3 team in the country. That's massive, and I think they deserve a lot of credit today for their efforts in helping get this win. So that's my like it. My love it is the thing I talked about at the very end of most of this that first section of the show, which was just that final drive. I can't say enough about that being the way that you close that game out. I mean, I call it a statement. I think that's a really good sort of synopsis of it. For an Ohio State team that we've had so many doubts about running the football, the physicality up front, and for you to close out a game that way, that's not something we usually see from this team, at least not of late. Not during the Ryan Day era, where they can barely run the football and they're sort of this finesse team, like we always say, and they win with Maseratis, but not with pickup trucks of on the offensive line and up front. So to see them just bully Penn State's defensive line, a really good defensive line, mind you, with Abdul Carter and others, that to me spoke volumes of the ability of this group, and the fact that when they want to, they have the will and the desire. They can pull out they can dominate a team in the trenches the way that they did at the end of that game. So I felt really good about that, and I just my only hope from here is that it becomes sort of like a stepping stone and a foundation to look back on and be like, all right, look what we did in this game on this last drive. Again, you go 11 plays, 58 yards to seal the game, and it was all run plays. You didn't pass the ball once. So for being a finesse team, like, that's the Ohio State team that you were kind of envisioning this year when you got the two great running backs in here. And so I hope this offensive line can stick, and it can become a point of strength for this team the rest of the way. We'll see what it looks like against Purdue and others moving forward. But like, I hope it's just I hope it's on the up and up from here, and they sort of find a makeshift version of this offensive line that works and helps them at least get close to achieving the big goals they hope to achieve in chasing a title. Last thing, my leave it for this game. I think you guys know where I'm going with this. The damn touchback out of the end zone rule. Leave that shit wherever you got. Launch it into the sun and let it never return to football ever again. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear about it. Never. Get rid of it. Send it to space. Whatever you got to do. I want nothing to do with the touchback out of the end zone rule if you fumble. It sucks momentum out of drives. And the team, unless the opposing team possesses the ball, I don't want to see that happen. And I think it was Richard who threw it out earlier. I want to see them just, that happens, move it back to the 20. You get a fresh set of downs from there, and you're off and you're running. I think that's the best way to do it, because I think it's total BS that you fumble out of the side of the end zone, and it's the only time where you just like lose possession of the ball, even if the other team never actually possessed the ball. Stupid. I maintain it's the dumbest rule in football. Targeting is a close second. But man, that's such bullshit to me. So please get rid of it. A couple answers here I want to get to. Richard, who's been chiming in a lot today. We appreciate your comments, Richard. He says, loved the blitzes and power running. I did actually think, I'll say this. Jim Knowles has been subject to a lot of criticism of late. And I think it's been somewhat warranted, along with Ryan Day criticism. I thought today, usually when he calls some blitzes, they're like the worst possible times and he gets absolutely burnt. And maybe they weren't as worried about that with a team like Penn State that just doesn't have like that standout wide receiver. I know they obviously have Tyler Warren, but I don't know that they were worried about him just like completely dismantling your defense or beating you so deep when you have some great safeties and secondary guys. But like, he called blitzes at good times today, and his defense made the right plays when they needed to in the biggest moments. So I give him some credit today. I thought the blitzes were definitely on the love it list as well, and that goes into obviously the defensive effort that I think we saw today. All right. Richard also let us know that Oregon's now up 14-7 in that game. I should have turned it on down here in my basement. I was so excited to jump on with you guys, I forgot. So, guys, appreciate you jumping on in. I do want to remind you, this podcast is now officially, as of this weekend, because I believe we started this show after the Penn State game last year, 1 year old. I'm the only one applauding, but hopefully if you're watching this at home, you're applauding along with me. A year-long podcast, a year-long journey doing Sons of the Shoe, and no end in sight because I plan on keeping this thing going. We might have some changing in terms of a new co-host for the show, which we're looking forward to. But whoever it is, you're going to enjoy the content as always, and I appreciate you guys jumping on in with me. But like, follow, subscribe, Sons of the Shoe, review Sons of the Shoe, wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, the Odyssey app, at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel, where many of you are watching this right now, or you can find all the previous episodes if you want to watch along and see my ugly mug. You're more than willing to. Did I mention Apple, by the way? I did mention Apple, but I'm mentioning it again because Apple's a big, big key, and we appreciate you guys going there to listen. Thanks again, guys, for stopping on in. I hope you enjoyed the show. I will be back with a preview of the Purdue game. Purdue can be a tough one, but it's at home, so that makes you feel a little bit better. But we'll preview the Purdue game. We'll get into all the specifics of what this matchup next week has in store and what lies ahead for the Buckeyes the rest of the season. This is also actually, you know what? Let me say this now. Let's plan on doing. I think I'm hosting Tuesday night. That just hit me. I was going to say I want to do sort of like a reaction to the college football playoff, the first ranking. But we might have to hold off this week or just do it super late in the night. I'll see. I'll figure out a way to do it. Maybe we'll do it Wednesday morning, whatever it might be. But I want to be able to react with you to the first college football playoff ranking, which does come out this week. We'll see where Ohio State falls. That's the other thing. I was mentioning the AP poll. Doesn't even matter this week. The AP poll, get that shit out of here, right? Like, now it's about the college football playoff poll. So we'll see where Ohio State falls in that and what the current playoff sort of setup looks like. But very much looking forward to that conversation. We'll figure out a way to do that. We'll obviously preview the Purdue game, and we keep on rolling. Good win. Buckeyes improve. Ryan Day staves off some of the heat for now. Always subject to change depending on what happens the rest of the season. But all around a good day to be an Ohio State Buckeye. Thanks for watching, guys, as always. And we'll get you out of here with a hearty Go Bucks.